culture. And this chapter does a really great job just kind of opening our eyes, because when we typically think of culture, we think of something foreign and something that a certain group of people do from another country that identifies them with their culture. But actually, we all have our particular own social communities. And these social communities, whether it's a group that you meet with on a weekly basis, or some of the people that you work with, or even your family unit, these make up all of your social communities and give you your very own culture. And your culture may change over time and over the course of the people that you surround yourself with, but these social communities are key in identifying your culture and enjoying the sense of culture and community that you can have. Culture is special, and it is what makes us all come together. And you have talked about and looked at cultural norms, but it can also be something that we view as difficult to understand when it is unfamiliar. So one thing we're going to do this week is examine your cultural intelligence. And so you'll get the chance to participate in a study by Harvard and to determine your own implicit bias as that relates to your cultural intelligence. I think you'll find that very interesting, and you'll get to pick which test you want to take to determine your cultural intelligence. When we talk about culture, there are different ways, different standards, criteria that we can use to measure culture, to define a certain culture. So let's think about the general American culture. And one standard, one criteria that we can use to measure is individualism versus collectivism. Is a culture more individualistic and everyone goes out to better himself or herself, or do they work together for the common good? And I think you would agree with me that America fosters an individualistic culture. Another set that we can use to examine is the masculinity or femininity of the culture. A great way to think about this is think about advertisements, maybe even job postings, and what kind of language do they use to advertise a current opening? Do they want someone who is a nurturer and who is caring? Or do they want someone who is a leader, who is powerful, who takes initiative and takes charge? So just thinking about the way that we word things can identify our masculinity or femininity in our culture. Is the culture working towards a long-term orientation and long-term goals, or is it more focused on the short term? And I think that our propensity towards even fast food identifies us and helps us see the short-term orientation of our American culture and how we work on immediate problems and immediate goals instead of focusing on the long term. Even think about our struggle with the environment. And other countries are working towards making the future better for generations to come, but Americans are more concerned with how is this going to affect us now in the short term. So when we are approaching a different culture, a culture that's unfamiliar to us, how do we respond? Your book lays out several different responses kind of on a Likert scale. So in one sense, there is uncertainty avoidance. If we see a culture that we're not familiar with, we just avoid it. We don't interact with those people, and we certainly don't place ourselves in that unfamiliar setting. Another way that we can respond to a culture is to resist it and to push back when approached by that culture or given an opportunity to become a part of that culture. We just resist and hold to our own culture and even avoid learning and exposing ourselves to another culture. Okay, we can definitely tolerate the culture, But that is not a positive thing. And as you read the book, it'll make more sense to you. Tolerating someone does not embrace and encourage their culture. It merely puts up with it and just allows it to exist, essentially. So understanding it goes a little bit more in the positive direction, where you try to get to know the culture and to learn about the culture. And yes, you can compare it to your own familiar situation and familiar identity, but you are taking that first step to learning that culture and understanding why that culture is the way it is and how it can be beautiful. Participation means that you place yourself in certain situations where you can participate actively in and with that culture. And then assimilation, you are going right into a situation. Maybe you are leaving your comfort zone and your culture and going into a regional area where that culture is present to become part of that culture and identify with that culture, which would ultimately give you the highest respect for that culture, to become part of the culture. So there's a long way that we can go. But I think just focusing on respect and realizing that respect is possible, and opening your eyes and your mind to the beauty of other cultures and not being so closed-minded and avoiding things that are unfamiliar and things that do not line up with the culture that you have enjoyed for your childhood years. And so I think you'll like this chapter, and I encourage you to look around your world and try to notice other cultures.